morning, everybody. It's January 15th, 2021. I'm Charlie Fink with my friend Ted Schilowitz and Lori Schwartz, who is the CEO of Story Tech consultancy focused on the tech and immersive industries. And she is also the governor of the Interactive Media Peer Group at the Television Academy. Lori is a frequent speaker. Ted and I have both worked with her on different projects. She's always got prestigious clients and brings me into great stuff. So it's a pleasure to bring you onto our podcast this morning to talk about CES, our big event of the year.
Woo! It's a pleasure to be
welcome,
here.
Lori. Welcome, Lori. I see you're both inside. I'm outside today because there's full-on morning chaos going on in the home today. So I took my quest outside because before the sun hits on the back lawn here, I can do my workout outside. And I figured, well,
I love that we all have
inside.
these nearby, that we all have that's just standing nearby.
I broke my battery strap. If there's anybody who has anything to do with Facebook, I broke it. And you have my address, so.
There you go. I'm sure I'll send another one, Charlie.
Yeah, send us
It
free
does
stuff.
not stand up well to daily use. I found that with my one also. You get it, and it's like all robust and stuff. And, after a couple of months of pounding on it, all of a sudden, it's like a little rickety and not quite the, ready for action device that it was. So anyway, let's talk about CES.
Virtual
right?
CES this week, right?
Yeah, virtual CES, the first and hopefully only virtual CES.
Yeah, it's been very interesting, and I've had mixed reports from colleagues that I usually go with every year. CES is sort of my big professional event where I bring about 14 consultants and we handle these big show floor tours, and we've been doing it for about 8 to 10 years now as CES is sort of official tour guides. So it was really
That's one of the most visible things about CES. It's like being in Red Square and all the different colored umbrellas that people are following around. You see those at all the big tourist Rome and other places where you see them in airports. So Lori, the people are following Lori at CES.
Yeah. They're following me and they're following a team, and we have this whole process, and we have like the headsets and a whole sort of, a couple of rooms in the different spaces and catering, and it's a whole executive thing. And I have to say, I thought my December was going to be a lot easier this year because I wasn't prepping for it. But then it turned into prepping for a version of virtual tours, which we did for some clients, which is not as exciting as the real thing. But what was even more difficult was that we were trying to show B-roll from all of these exhibitors who were on press embargo until the week of CES. And so with virtual, you have to prep it before. And so it was virtually impossible to get all the B-roll we needed to really do the tour appropriately because we couldn't get a hold of it. So it was an interesting challenge.
Charlie and Lori, did you guys do a lot of speeches and presentations throughout the week? I was pretty loaded up. They had
I did one. I mean, usually for 2 months, even 3 months before CES, I'm being bombarded with pitches, both general tech pitches and then pitches that have to do with XR, and just like random people who want to meet. I mean, that's the beauty of CES.
Yeah.
There's 200,000 people there, and so I think, for example, Lori's tours. This is supposed to be the zeitgeist event for people in tech and tech-related businesses. So in the old days, CES used to be about people who were retailers coming to meet with the manufacturers and plan their lineup and what they're selling the following December. It's just an ongoing cycle. And today it's not that at all. I mean, I suppose there's some of that, but there's so little retail compared to online. But there's huge presence by Amazon at CES. There's, so I don't know how you put that across online, right? Because things online these Zoom calls get smaller and smaller
Yeah.
and more intimate, because once you blow them up, it may as well be an audio thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we always have in the real world created a framework of trends, right? So that, because these busy executives get so overwhelmed and you can't blame them. So if you give them a framework, and then you can shove a lot of different exhibitors inside of a framework. So we still did that for the virtual version. It just becomes a lot of talking though, if you can't cut to B-roll or cut to
Yes.
exhibitors. And it was just an interesting challenge because the exhibitors are too busy manning their virtual CES booths to be on your live stream. And so
Right.
I think the model is maybe to do stuff after CES, and then you've had time to gather everything. But I'm playing with all of that. But I do think, even though there were 2,000 exhibitors this year, normally there's about 4,000. So there was definitely a decrease in the amount of participation, but you had a lot more global participants because people
Right.
who normally couldn't afford.
Sure.
So that was kind of cool, right? And a lot
Yeah,
of
you're
complaints.
making
Sorry,
an
go
interesting point. You're making an interesting point that I was observing throughout the week and thinking about even beforehand. Is I saw the companies that actually have really good media understanding,
Yeah.
know how to shine. And I was thinking about this past Apple presentation when they had to go virtual as opposed to doing their WWDC or any kind of press launch, and how they actually took their resources and understanding and professionalism of TV production, because Apple and Amazon now have TV production, they're competing with the major studios, and essentially applied it to their corporate offerings of their new products. It was slick, it was well thought out, amazing graphics, real-time stuff, and it really worked really well. Whereas what you all talked about at the beginning is the virtual, the real CES. The power of CES is the power of the gathering and the power of just the connectivity and just seeing all this stuff.
The scale of it, the mayhem.
Right.
And the challenge that I think you have virtually is a lot of the companies, even some of the really big companies, didn't really grasp the power of media and actually understand how to use media correctly. And maybe that's the learning that we can help and others can help with these large corporations is as we get to this, not going fully back to, generation 1, and now we're in gen 2 of this mix of virtual and real, we've got to all get like better TV producers.
The virtual conference, in my opinion, has not yet been invented.
Right.
I think that, because together with presence, you have commitment, right? I'm committed to be fully present in Las Vegas for 5 days. I'm going to fully participate. I'm going to go to press conferences to reconnect with my friends in the press. I'm going to have a dinner with Ted. I'm going to wave hi to Lori in the hallway 4 times. I'm going to, there's a ritualization to it.
Yeah.
That you cannot replicate.
And the meals, the late night meals, and the people that you really only see
Absolutely.
once a year, that kind of thing. I mean, there is this moment every year where I run into Shelley Palmer, who was the original tour giver. And there's a little like animosity between us, kind of, and so there's a moment where we meet on the floor and people take pictures, and it's the whole moment, but it's every year, and it's kind of a beautiful moment, and that we don't have that this year,
And
so
I always watch the pictures every year, and I'm like, oh, I look better that year than the year before.
I had hoped they would have been a bit more ambitious.
Yeah.
But to do anything of scale, it would have to be all you do.
It is,
right? And they just are not built to do that.
No, and
you can't remake yourself in 4 or 5 months and then go do that.
Right, and it's exactly what I've been experiencing with getting clients as an event consultant. Getting clients to jump into this is moving past the Zoom call, branding this video, treating it professionally, getting
There's so many
professional-
things that you could do, and there's no reason to have it
Right.
tied to the timeline of CES if
Right.
it's virtual.
Right. And getting professional people who, not everyone can speak on camera. It's not,
Right.
and that's okay.
Because they never do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's not their job. I mean, this is like the first rule is that don't let somebody do something the first time live. Right. The fourth time, the fifth time, okay. But so that is the problem with media. These are not media companies. So they need the context to be able to present themselves, in the right way.
Yeah.
In order to get what they want, which is people to pay attention to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Like you'd have, when you'd walk around the show floor, you'd often see these professional presenters, right, in their business suits and their little lavalier mics and stuff.
Yeah.
And sometimes it worked great because you got like the kind of information you wanted really succinctly and professionally, but often it didn't because it wasn't authentic. It was like that was just a layer of a spokesperson.
Yeah.
So what you kind of really want is this authentic, like this is the person that actually built the thing, kind of talking about the thing.
Of course, and if it's online, why shouldn't it be that person, right?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. We
They kind of have to be good at it.
Yeah, we often on the tours don't give the mic to the booth people because the booth people have memorized a paragraph.
Right.
And that's it, right? And so you may give it to them for the very deep down the well, as you were mentioning, specifics about the product, but then it requires our tour guide to frame it inside of the landscape, and give the back history. And often the floor, and you guys know this, the floor itself is a trend, right?
Right, of course. Well, that's what I mean by the zeitgeist.
Yeah, the booths grow or shrink or go away. Like it was seminal last year when Intel was gone.
Right.
And Intel had that whole corner in Central Hall, and they were gone.
No one replaced them because CES has moved on. It's not that important at CES anymore for the chip guys to be there.
Right. Although
well, there's a culture to it, right? There's a culture. It's almost like these large conventions are sort of like a city that gets sprung up, and you wander around a city, just like when you would wander around Paris or wander around Brussels, you'd go down this corner and you'd find something really unique that they have no money to market. There's a small little cheap shop, and that's
of course the serendipity of the conference floor.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't go to the conference floor to see the Intel booth. I like seeing how cool it is and try and guesstimate how much money it must have cost them.
Yeah, which never made sense because they're not B2C.
But in the old days, the argument would have been, even though the customers of my customer are there.
Yeah.
Right.
It's about showing off for your stockholders, right?
Right.
It's about showing off for the market, and it's about showing off for the press.
Right.
The virtual side has had to figure that out. It's really fascinating to kind of study it.
But
could you recognize trends this year, guys?
Say it again.
So with all of that being said, could we recognize any trends this year? I mean, I see a couple from the press, but honestly, it did not make an impression.
I took away from our XR world, because obviously this podcast is focused on our XR universe, is that this is a year of what I would refer to as quiet maturity, meaning there weren't a lot of like ridiculous announcements of stuff happening and all these new headsets. There were a few things out there, but they weren't that meaningful. They were like, oh yeah, they're doing it. TCL had a
really breakthrough things. They were incremental improvement things.
Correct. And that's actually a really good sign for our trajectory, right? It's like every year doesn't have to be a year where you launch a whole bunch of stuff. Some years have to be the industry is finding its way with the tool sets that they've built and maturing them. And then the next wave is being prepared by developers in secret right now. And I think that's, to me, that was sort of my takeaway from our little part of the CES universe. I don't know if you agree with that, but that was my takeaway.
Well, again, what I found most intriguing was the way you ended that sentence, which is developed in secret right now. Yeah. What do you know that we don't know?
Well, my life is, as you know, Charlie, is odd and very multi-layered, and I'm always thinking and
Ed is always thinking about which NDA he signed.
Right, right.
I'm just
You have
forced
to
to
get
look
him
10
to
years into the
accidentally
future.
say
so.
something.
No, I mean, I will say this really for me was, if a tree falls in the forest, did it really make a noise? CES.
Right, right.
You know, instead of getting, I mean, instead of getting 1,000 pitches and 1,000 press releases, I got 24 over 2 months.
But we all did go to
little.
the recap, right? We all did get our recap stuff. We went to The Verge, we went to Engadget, we went to Wired, we went to all our, at least I did, all our press outlets that I would do in the morning at the hotel before I would like get out and go, okay, what did I miss yesterday? So I was able to just do that from my home, and thank God for that. Thank God for all those people that were still aggregating all the information and distilling it down into bite-sized chunks, just like you do as well, Charlie, and you do, Lori. Like, someone's got to take it and manage it, right, for everybody, and at least that still happens. So you read a lot about LG with all their foldable, bendable stuff, which I still am like, I'm still waiting for that moment where it's like, oh, now it makes sense. Now I know what I would use it for. But at least they're out there pushing it and doing it, you know.
Well, if you look at the virtual worlds portion, both Philips and P&G created worlds that you went into to look at their products, right? So in your world, my tour guides all really enjoyed the Philips virtual world, and I don't know if it was Verbella or who it was that they built their worlds in. Maybe you guys know that, but it was a place for people to go and try out their products, and a lot of people liked Philips' version of it. I don't know what the software was, but they enjoyed going in and playing with things. And P&G in the last couple of years has come out as its own brand at CES, as opposed to a holding company, which was new for them over the last couple of years, where they showed off a lot of innovations, which, if you know how those big holding companies work, they never talk as P&G. And in fact, there's competition between the units, the brands on the marketing dollars and who's going to get to do what. So it was very interesting when they come out as a holding company, right?
Yeah, I got invited, and some of my Viacom CBS colleagues got invited to a thing called Spatial Web that was hosted by MediaLink. It was Mark Cassin's thing, so he's kind of a presence in the world, and iHeartRadio, and they had Billie Eilish and Ryan Seacrest. So they definitely tried to get the CES celebrity vibe working. Yeah, and Dua Lipa. Yeah. So you know about it, and it was an interesting kind of like evolution of Zoom, where they're using some of the spatial tools of moving around and gamified kind of dancing around a space, but instead of avatars, it was little video icons like Zoom, but in little circles, so you could actually see yourself and not a computer generated avatar. So it was an interesting experiment that we kind of found interesting, and that was a good, I think they got like 1,000 people to gather and do it. So it was a bit of a mosh pit. It was like kind of crazy, but it sort of worked. It was an interesting start to it.
One trend I wanted to bring up with you guys that I read about a lot in the roundups was 5G. So this is like the 4th year of the 5G being a trend, and 5G being the year that it happens. So tell me about your impressions of that at the show, and what you think is really going to happen this year.
Well, I did an event with Verizon Media, and so a lot of their experts were talking about this is the hands-on year of 5G, meaning that the previous years we kept talking about it, and because there was no mobile Congress in 2020, this was the year that a lot of the devices that can play in 5G were launched or shown. And so a lot of these folks were calling it the hands-on 5G year, like the real 5G year. And you and I were talking about this offline, that, you've heard this before, but that is what a lot of the experts are claiming, is that this is the first year there's real devices and there is a network out there. And a lot of the questions that were coming from some of the live streams that I did from people were, how will I know if my device is 5G? And will this solve for my kids streaming, my husband streaming, and I'm streaming, and how do we survive? Will 5G solve for the pandemic's needs? And they couldn't really answer that question.
Right.
You know.
I think what I found interesting is that with all of the really smart marketing people trying to find and identify use cases for 5G over the last couple of years, what's happened now that, people just, people can get a 5G device of the particular brand that they like, and it's out in the world, and they're using it, and I'm using it, and I happen to live in a dense enough part of LA where, like, I've got 5G right now. I have, it's on, right? And what I've discovered is the first real use case is, even though we're much less mobile these days, so we're not actually using it a lot because we have our home networks. When we get back to mobile, crystal clear video communication while walking around the park, while being in a car, while being away from your home network is going to probably become one of the better and more functional uses of, it doesn't need to be all choppy. It doesn't need to be, even with LTE, it was kind of like, it would sort of make everything soft and dull and frame limited. And with 5G, it's just as good. I'm assuming I'm coming across pretty good here on my home network. Yeah. It would literally look just like this if I was in my self-driving car driving somewhere and doing this video chat. And that's an important step to the future. And I don't think the folks figured that out,
I'm looking at your frame and I hear you and I see you, but you could definitely be helped by 5G right now. I don't know how.
Well,
you could be. I'm seriously. So I think you're making a good point, which is what I always say, which is take something I'm already doing and make it better.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. There was an announcement and some press. I think you even wrote about this, Charlie, that what NVIDIA is doing with video using AI to pluck the best version of your face with lower bandwidth. So I think one of the trends that we're noticing is solving for when you don't have good bandwidth.
Yeah.
Like, how do you create, because it is depressing when you can't see your colleague well, and it adds stress. So if NVIDIA's figured out how to deliver a better face in this environment with lower bandwidth, then that's an interesting evolution, right? So like, how is the lack of good signal lit up a lot of solutions?
You bring up a good point, because of course that's Zoom's secret sauce, right? I mean, Zoom figured out how to balance all the latency issues that we have, as well as manage the sound. If you go into Google Meet now, it's intolerable.
Yeah.
So, Zoom, so all you have to do is go to a few Google Meets to understand what Zoom has done and why they are so successful. So again, it goes back to take what I'm already doing and make it much better.
Yeah.
Because lots of people were doing this before the pandemic and even before Zoom was launched. Cisco thought they were doing just fine, which is why the guy who founded Zoom left and started his own company, because he didn't think they were. He had a better way of doing it, and we're using that right now.
I hate, hate is a strong word, but I hate GoTo and Teams and all those guys, because I also don't know who's talking half the time. The interface is just, confusing. It's like, wait, are you presenting right now? Like, can I share? It's just not clean. And then you had StreamYard. Did you guys ever use StreamYard? StreamYard is a browser-based solution that Hopin, which is an event company, just bought. Right. And StreamYard,
is that right?
It let you brand it, which I think that's the piece missing in all of this, is why can't we brand our windows better, even in a meeting? Yeah. If we're in this all day, let's make it look good.
Right. Well, I think that my guess is that Zoom will be building more and more flexibility into that, and more and more little AR-ish controls, like, blurring your background, or improve, you can improve, your image. You can make it a little out of focus. You can, enhance.
Yeah, the Streisand box that you click for the
exactly for your close-up. So you look good in your close-up. So, and I imagine Zoom will continue to develop that. Zoom is a very wealthy company right now, and they've got a lot of customers, and they've got a lot of competitors. So I would imagine their R&D budget is high, and there are probably hundreds of people working on different, they're working on apparently email and calendar. So they're gonna try and become more of a platform like
Yeah,
Google
it's
or
kind of
Facebook.
fascinating. They're trying to spread out their wings, kind of like Google did from search to, well, we can do this and we can do this and we can use some of our resources. The one surprise I think I had, and maybe it's just because I'm such an Apple head and have been for essentially my entire career, is that Zoom overtook FaceTime even for people that are Apple to Apple. I mean, and I still actually prefer FaceTime for all my casual discussions, and I actually still think it works better and it's just more integrated and the image is better and the sound is better. But for some reason, we talk about this chemistry dynamic, even people that are all fully Appleified Apple, and I guess just because we don't know if you're on a PC or we don't know, it's like, I use FaceTime probably half as much as I use Zoom. And and it's really interesting that FaceTime become casual.
If you're sitting at your computer, it seems like people don't like to use FaceTime, but if you're just on the go, FaceTime is good.
It's just interesting. I don't have an answer.
It's awkward on the go, I think,
Anyway.
So we're coming to the end of our half hour, guys. Parting thoughts about virtual CES and what we're going to see next year, Lori?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think if indeed the vaccines roll out and people are willing to gather again, I think there's a real hunger to be around each other. But I do think everyone's going to have to learn, to your point, about how to market in this environment. And so I think there's going to be an interesting combination of these two things happening, that hybrid thing. But I also think it's interesting for CES to keep the venue open for the next month. It's going to be open until mid-February, because I haven't spent that much time in it because I was working this week doing things I was doing. So I want to go in and spend some time looking at these companies, which for me is a treat, because by the end of this CES week, I have hardly gone anywhere because I've been working. So I like the idea now that I get to spend the next couple of weeks actually digging in. So I think this will be a component moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's really insightful. I hope that they pick up on that and they promote through email blasts and things, best of CES. These were the highest rated discussions. These were the products that got the most interest. Like, you can spread out time, right?
Yeah.
Which we would do on our own by follow-ups and all the other stuff. But this year, because they have this now giant repository of all this media content, they should start to do some culling. And this was not really all that meaningful, and nobody really was going to get that much out of this. But this little nugget of this little company, someone should shine a light on these guys, because they, and CES does awards and best of and stuff like that. If they really take advantage of that within the channels of continual promotion of, this is what you might have missed at CES, I think they'll actually find a really unique benefit, because people can spread their time and take half hour a day over the next month to find that unique speech that they wanted to, that unique voice they wanted to hear from, or that unique product. I just hope that they realize that they can pick up on that and benefit from that. We'll see.
Yeah, they need to talk to us.
I think that it'll be interesting to see how CES bounces back. On one hand, I think there'll be a lot of pent-up demand for it. But on the other hand, I do think it's kind of a super spreader event in Vegas in general. And CES, people are flying in from China, Asia, Mongolia, Siberia, South Africa, all over the globe. It's the biggest super spreader event you could possibly imagine. And although I have to be there, I think I'll be masked up even after a vaccine. I don't think that the new normal is going to be the old normal.
Yeah. And I think
a lot of things are going to change, and I think CES is kind of at the epicenter of that. So it'll be a big bellwether.
I think the masks that we saw, some really cool masks with sensors and things like that. Yep. So I think by then we'll have great masks where you can actually hear someone, because I don't know if you guys have found this, but I can't tell who's talking to me anymore.
I haven't been in person enough for it to really be an issue for me. Yeah. But I can see how that would be an issue.
I mean, if you go to a doctor's office or something and the nurses behind the thing talk to you, you're like, who's, it's just, We need to fix that.
We are lucky that we are safe and we have each other and we have Zoom and we have our podcast and we have our listeners and we have the world of tech, which is going to continue to evolve rapidly, no matter where we are, which is kind of one of the amazing things, magical things about it. So everybody, thank you. Thanks, Lori. Great to see you. Ted, I love you, brother. Let's get in on some pro putt this weekend.
Absolutely.
All right.
Hey,
Bye, everybody.
It's an honor to
Thank
talk
you.
to you guys. Thank you.